Welcome back to the Premier League show. As you can see, our guest tonight, former Newcastle Norwich goalkeeper Tim Krul. We're going to focus on Manchester United after CASEMIRO confirmed that he will not reverse his decision to leave the club at the end of the season. United announced in January that CASEMIRO would leave the club when his contract expires after 4 seasons at Old Trafford, more than 150 appearances. And the reason this has sort of resurfaced is because he's spoken recently, CASEMIRO, after Brazil's 2-1 defeat by France last night in an international friendly. This is what he had to say. "I'm still enjoying it a lot in Manchester. It is huge, the affection that fans have shown towards me, but I do really believe the decision is made and done. I believe it will be some difficult moments, these final games at Manchester United." OK, let's get Tim's thoughts on CASEMIRO. I mean, obviously, you know, his time at Real Madrid before he came to Manchester United, all of that experience. But do you sense, you know, what he's saying is right? It's the right time for him to go?
I think I was quite surprised when the announcement came in January.
Yeah.
There was so much football still to play for. So I always find it a bit difficult when managers do this in January or players come out leaving. I don't understand why he did it in Jan, but that's his decision. Ultimately, what a player again at Real Madrid. So much success, so many Champions League trophies. And to be fair, at United, he's had a rougher roller coaster ride, but he won a trophy. And also, what you forget is the impact he will have on the new generation, the younger players like Mainu, because these kind of players will take so much of this experience, and I'm sure he'll be one of those mentors that will look after this kind of young players coming through.
Do you think that that's, I suppose, an underrated success metric for CASEMIRO? Look, he's won 2 trophies in a United shirt, so, you know, some people would say probably not been the success that United fans would have hoped, given what he achieved at Real Madrid. It's obviously hard to compare to that incredible midfield he was part of with Toni Kroos and Luka Modric. But, you know, the fact that he could provide that mentorship, you know, it's an amazing education for someone like Kobbie Mainoo to have. So is that something that maybe he should value, going, yeah, I at least provided that?
100%. And I think with data coming into the game, I think the whole experience side of football is being undervalued, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think the core of these kind of players who create that culture around the training ground, have that respect that he ousts quality. And I think when a player like that comes into a changing room, he will have the changing room's respect. And again, for the new generation to see players like him putting in the performances like he has, obviously not the level that he did at Madrid, but yeah, I think it's very undervalued that, and I think he has been a success. And
also, given the fact that United, for a large part, have struggled over the course of the last few seasons that he's been there, so leadership qualities as well that he provides. So, okay, United moving on from CASEMIRO, do they need to sign 2 central midfielders this season?
Yeah, obviously they have to think about what's next, and there's some top players available in the summer. Are they going to get them? I think there's a lot of suitors out there for the top young players. I mean, you've got, I think they were linked with Baliba, and obviously Elliot Anderson is up there with probably the most elite players at the moment in the Premier League.
Talk to me about Anderson. I mean, you know, it's all right playing for Newcastle and for Forest, but what about playing for Manchester United? There's a little bit more weight when you're wearing that shirt, surely.
I love watching him play. I think Newcastle were devastated to see him go. A local lad like that, Eddie Howe knew that he would be in the England squad sooner than later. So yeah, again, and he's produced it. I think he went another level at Forest. I think the stats show up that he's in the top 5, if not top 3.
Yeah.
Top midfielders in the league at the moment. So yeah, I do think he's ready for another step. United. I
think also it's be interesting to see what kind of summer he has. Can you see him starting alongside Declan Rice for England in the World Cup?
Yeah, I think I love what Tuchel is doing with England. I think that he's got so many top players to choose from, and I think the way the coach is building at the moment, his way or the highway. And I think there's a lot of players who are individually amazing, but they need to fit in that kind of team culture. And Elliot Anderson, I think the levels he produced this season, he's definitely up there that he will make a good stake to be on that plane.
Let's talk about another midfielder who, in fact, scored against Northern Ireland in the playoff semi-final last night, and that's Sandro Tonali. Yes, another Newcastle player. Sorry to keep mentioning them, but they're obviously of real interest to many clubs. Tonali in particular, because he's of interest to Arsenal too. How good a fit would he be?
Yeah, I think, again, the Italian international. I think he scored for Italy yesterday. Top player for Newcastle. I think him, Joe Linton and Bruno have been the reason why Newcastle were so successful the last few years. So clearly they're going to attract a lot of interest, and teams like United clearly are going to look at players like him, and understandably the agents will be chucking the names in the press, and it shows the quality of players that Newcastle have now, that they're being linked with these top teams.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think, we'll see about what impact that might have on Newcastle.
Let's get to Manchester United. They're in the market for a number of positions, aren't they, when the transfer window opens in the summer? Let's go live to our reporter, Daniel Khan. Always lovely to see you, Dan. Look, what is Manchester United's main priority, would you say?
Yeah, afternoon, Vicky. It might not come as much of a surprise to you, but it is the midfield. After this resurgence under Michael Carrick, quite incredible over the last few months, when you consider they were 6th in January, quite a few points off a Champions League position. They now found themselves 3rd and quite a bit ahead of the likes of Liverpool and Chelsea, trying to chase them down. Now they are preparing for a return to European football next season. That does look like it is Champions League football, which means they need to expand their squad, but look to reinforce it as well. And midfield is the priority. What I can tell you from my understanding, the latest on that, is they still continue to have strong interest in trying to bring a 6 and an 8. Let's talk about the 8 first, and Elliot Anderson pretty much is top of that list. Now, from the Nottingham Forest side and from the player perspective, we understand that he won't be really considering his future until after the World Cup. If it looks very likely as it is, that he'll be selected for Thomas Tuchel's side. Why is that? Well, he's part of a relegation fight with Nottingham Forest. He's incredibly focused on that. But Manchester United, he would be their ideal number 8. We've seen how impressive he has been this season. Whether they can get that over the line this summer after the World Cup. Manchester City also strong contenders for him. From Manchester United's perspective, they're not going to want to lose another player to Manchester City. Antoine Semenyo picked them in January, so that's very interesting to watch. Other 8 in that position might be the likes of Adam Wharton at Crystal Palace to look out for as well. You look at the number 6 position with Casemiro leaving the club in the summer with his contract expiring. They need someone to replace those defensive qualities the Brazilian brings to the team, and I think ideally that is Carlos Baleba of Brighton. United had strong interest in him last summer. We also reported in January they made tentative inquiries around his availability. Now, it's interesting what Mark, Keith and Alan were talking about in terms of transfers in a World Cup year. Manchester United, remember, got Mateus Cunha sealed, signed, delivered well before the transfer window even opened last season because of his release clause. They were able to get some business done quite early on, and maybe with Baleba not involved in the World Cup with Cameroon, and also just maybe with a dip in his performance this year, perhaps his value was arguably lowered a little bit as well. So maybe Manchester United will be really interested in trying to negotiate a lower fee with Brighton, get that deal earlier done in the window. Also have to talk about Sandro Tonali. He's been in the news quite a lot in the last week or so. Now, Keith makes a great point. Whether this is from an agent perspective, whether Newcastle make Champions League football or not, what I can tell you is, again, he's very high up on the Manchester United list of midfielders. Now, whether that is something in the action in the summer, we will wait and see, but he certainly does have his admirers at Old Trafford in the summer. I'll just lastly say, definitely agree with Alan Pardew. Having covered Wolves a little bit in the last few years, João Gomez, I would be looking at him if I'm any top club in the Premier League. I think he is a brilliant midfielder, and maybe not seeing the best of him this year with Wolves struggling in the Premier League, but he is definitely someone who I think would be a really good option for a lot of top clubs to look at.